I'm excited to be here with you all. We had a very interesting legislative session this year, and it was in a lot of ways very successful. I'll start off with that because we had a great start and a great ending, but I'll go ahead and get started with the beginning point. So there are a few themes going into this legislative session, and a lot of it was centered around the fact that the state had over $32 billion worth of surplus revenue from the last biennium. And so there was a lot of conversation about using a lot of those resources for property tax relief. And so there was a lot of conversation about how that relief would happen. And then also there was some hope that we would also include some infrastructural investments because this is one-time sources of revenue, and usually infrastructure is very hard to pay for. And if we had some one-time revenue that we could apply towards some infrastructural improvements, that would be a good thing to keep Texas leading as it has been for the last number of years. And so that was where the key conversation was headed at the beginning of session. And this was kind of a historic surplus, by the way. I don't think we've ever had $32 billion available. And so that was a big part of the year. But as you see further down on my slide, there was a number of other issues that came up that distracted us from some of these priorities of property tax relief and infrastructure investment, as well as a number of issues that the legislature brings to every session that we have. But some of the high profile controversies that occurred that kind of distracted everybody was the expulsion of one of the House members, Brian Slayton. The House voted to expel a member, which I don't recall that happened any time in recent history, but it was a big deal. And it happened and got a lot of the focus of the legislature away from some of our key public policy issues and focused on that for a period of time. But that went away after that was taken care of relatively quickly. But the key issue that's still out there is the House at the very end of session. And thankfully, they waited towards the end of the regular session to do this because it really could have disrupted a lot of the other public policy initiatives that were going on. But at the very end of session, they voted to impeach the Attorney General after they had come to a conclusion on an investigation about his dealings within the within the Attorney General's office, as well as some ethics complaints. So that is still pending. The Senate is being charged with being the one to administer the hearing and the judicial process, if you will. I think that should happen sometime around September or so. And so that's still waiting to be dealt with. But those were certainly distractions from some of the things that we typically deal with in a regular session of the legislature. And at the very end here, I note something: there's disagreement among leadership. Now, what year is there not disagreement among leadership? It's always happening. But this year, there was a very powerful back and forth, tit for tat between the House Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor. And a lot of it was fighting over the property tax issues and about how we can offer that relief to property owners and in what way will that look. And so there was a lot of conversation around that. But at the end of the day, it all worked out, and I'll kind of get to that point eventually. But I wanted to just kind of lay the groundwork for what the session was starting to look like, and then kind of how some of the little flare-ups that occurred. So in the light of all of that, I want to give you a layout of some of the things that we were able to accomplish, some good things that happened to benefit commercial properties and the commercial business. And I'll go ahead and start lining some of that out. And then I'll finish with where the property tax bills ended up, because I'm sure that's where we're going to focus a lot of conversation. Now, we will have the opportunity for Q&A. I think you have the opportunity to enter a chat question or a question in there. Happy to jump on some of that towards the end of this conversation and look forward to engaging your questions there. So one of the first areas we wanted to focus on, since I'm going to cover the property tax issue towards the end here, the second part of that was infrastructure. And so one of the things that we really try to focus on at Texas Realtors is making sure that we're paying attention to infrastructure investments in the state so that we can stay ahead of development and our growth. And honestly, that's a struggle. It takes a lot of resources to keep up with our roadways, our access to water, public education, broadband being a newer issue. And all of those things require a lot of resources. And so sometimes we have to kind of figure out how to balance the needs across the state. But this year with the budget surplus, we were able to kind of try to tackle some of those things. And I'll focus real quickly here on the first bills here. We created a fund for broadband expansion projects. Last session, we started the broadband, effectively the agency that would be there to kind of manage broadband in the state of Texas. And we found last session that Texas was not able to tap into a lot of the federal dollars to access broadband funds for investments to grow broadband across the state. And I'm including urban and rural investment. It's not just a rural investment. There are a lot of areas in the urban area that need that infrastructure investment for broadband that are not there yet. And so it's all over the state. But the good thing is we started the office last session that allowed us to access some of those federal grant dollars. But then now we, with this session with House Bill 9 with Representative Ashby, that fund is now created to help start building those projects. Now, it's not going to fund every project right now, but it's a good starting point so that we can start putting money into broadband expansion across the state. We learned a lot during COVID. We learned a lot during work from home issues, and broadband has risen to the top with regard to the state's concerns. And so we were happy to help facilitate that conversation to expand and fund broadband. And additionally, Senate Bill 1238 with Senator Nichols helped to kind of enhance the broadband access mapping and figuring out who was kind of the prioritized eligibility for broadband investments. And so that kind of helped to prioritize the state's investment and where they're going to resource those funds. We also looked at water supply issues all the time. And there's a fund created for new water supply. And
I'm sorry, Trey. Sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind transitioning the slides, please?
You know what?
It's stuck on the first one on our end.
All right. Well, I thought I did that. So let me move to it chose the wrong screen. My bad. Bear with me. I didn't realize the green was not on the right screen. Let's see if that works. Okay, for some reason, it's not liking my selection of screens, so I'm going to manually do it here. Bear with me, guys. Sorry. I'm not sure why it's not doing it right. It usually does it correctly. All right. So here's a slide that was the one I was referencing to when it came to the amount of the surplus, and then the kind of the telling of the controversies that happened there. So the 32.7 billion in surplus was discussed on that slide, and then I was here on the infrastructure slide, and that one I was towards the end of, but we were talking about Representative Ashby's broadband expansion bill, HB 9, Senate Bill 1238, Senator Nichols bill to help map and prioritize the investments for infrastructure. And then the last one is Senate Bill 28 by Senator Perry to invest in new water supply. And so that's where those bills were investments in infrastructure across. These are highlighted ones that we selected as key ones that were stuff that we'd worked on in the legislature to help increase the investments here. You'll note that the ones with asterisks, the HJR 125 and SJR 75 have the asterisks, and those are going to appear on the ballot in November because they're creating funds that requires an election by Texans. And so that will be a couple items on your ballot for next year, in addition to some other items related to the property tax bills I'll get to here shortly. So everybody, please make sure to vote in November. Moving on to economic development. This was a kind of a reconstitution of the corporate incentive packages available for taxing districts to be able to incentivize investment and growth in their communities. That had expired at the end of last session. And for 2 years, Texas did not have those tools available to compete against other states that did have those tools. And so they worked really hard to figure out a way that everyone can agree to work towards some economic development agreements to help incentivize entities to come to their communities. So that was a House Bill 5 by Representative Hunter. And so that helped to keep Texas competitive as well. Moving on to development process. There's been some previous work we've worked on in previous years where we have kind of helped improvise kind of a shot clock bill during the development process, just because time is money. And it takes a lot of time sometimes to get through the development process. And then sometimes that clock gets reset. And so there's a whole lot of conversation about how we can make things more affordable and work through the development process with these communities. And this bill, House Bill 14 by Representative Harris, is a way to kind of help with maybe the cities or the counties being overloaded with some of these inspections that are required during the permitting process. And so this particular bill allows a third party to come in and conduct the permit review, inspection, whatever it is, on behalf of the regulatory body, if the city or county is taking more than 15 days or whatever, if they've gone beyond their time limit. Then that way you have some relief. Yes, you'll have to pay for that third party, but the point is you can keep moving along instead of being bogged down with the red tape that sometimes happens at the city or county level. So this is intended to expedite the process to help keep things moving along, and we hope that's helpful. Again, like almost every law, there's always ways to kind of tweak it and improve on it. We'll be listening during the next couple interim to make sure that we hear how it's working, and if there's ways we can make this work better or improve on it, we'd be happy to help work with the legislature to make that a even greater success. Moving on to the next issue, property rights. So that's something Texas Realtors always focuses on, and we focus on a number of issues there, and two of them I wanted to bring to your attention. Now, obviously, I'm talking to a commercial audience, but the idea here is Senate Bill 1668 is a bill that's related to HOAs and condos associations. And we worked a lot last session on HOA reform. And so we also wanted to extend some of those good reforms we had found and got approved last session into the condo statute, which is a different set of statutes in the state statutes. And so we wanted to make sure condominiums were able to benefit from some of those improvements that we made. And so what we did was we extended a lot of those things to the condo association, where you're going to get more transparency, you're going to get a lot more due process or if there are any conflicts that you have with your condominium association. But the point is, they will also be posted on the TREC website. So if you're curious about whether there's a HOA or a condominium association out there, TREC, it should be findable through the TREC website, which creates more transparency. And so a lot of those measures we brought in there, and we realize a lot of mixed use developments include condominiums. And so that's why we wanted to extend that. And that's why I'm bringing this to a commercial audience, to make sure you're aware of it. The second issue is House Bill 1750 by Representative Burns. This is more of a, it's a private property rights bill related to long-term property owners that are on the edge of a city or inside the city limits that, like, for example, in a commercial perspective, it might be a future grocery store or a future mega center, like maybe a Walmart or something like that. And when they typically buy these tracts of land, they'll sit there and hold that tract of land for a period of time until there's enough population or growth around it to then launch the store. And the point is some of the cities have been harassing some of these property owners with code violations, like they consider a crop a weed, and they'll send their people out there to mow it down. And you've just destroyed someone's crop. So this is kind of a right to farm bill, but it's also, I look at it as, you know, those buy and hold long-term commercial investments for future growth. And this helps to protect those property owners from having to be able to maintain their agricultural exemption, have a farmer work the property until they need to go build that shopping center, superstore, or a grocery store, whatever it is. And this allows them to afford to be able to hold it for a long period of time, to be able to wait till that community grows around it. So we believe this is a good improvement to the property rights bundle of sticks that we have. And we look forward to seeing how that helps kind of hopefully stop some of that harassment that happens with some of these property owners. Moving on to real estate transactions. Now, transactionally, we watch a lot of that legislation as well. And this first one, House Bill 19 by Representative Murr, includes the creation of a business court. And this is for some of those larger transactions, like $10 million or more, that or complaints that are $10 million or more. Typically, different business models and business complaints have a very technical reason for the complaint. And it's very expensive to take through a court process. If you can imagine the hours and hours it takes to lay out to a jury or to a judge all of the details of why this business model works in a certain way and how it all works and how the competitiveness works. And so imagine lining all that out and how many attorney hours it takes to get to that point before you can render a decision. The idea here is they're going to create a business court that has a little bit more business savviness, a better understanding of how businesses work. And so maybe those business-minded jurors and jurists will be available to this court to help make some of those complaints, one, move faster, go through the process faster, maybe understand the issue a little bit more to where you're not having to spend so much attorney time and depositions and fact finding to get to the bottom of the issue. So that's where we hope this might help some of those big business issues. Hopefully we don't see that a lot, but it's available to us now, and we're looking forward to seeing how that works. The next one is Senate Bill 1916 by Senator Parker. This was a bill we worked on that was a PID bill. And we've had some issues with PIDs, public improvement districts, because there's a lack or delay in when a city or county creates one to when they actually post the information publicly and make that available. What we've tried to do is create more transparency by making requirements to have this information on your parcel lookup at the appraisal district. So when you look up your property, it lists all your taxing units, and then we're going to add a PID. If there's a PID that has an assessment on your property, that will be included. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more transparent to you that when you're looking to buy or you're owning a piece of property, that a PID has been created and you're now going to be due to pay an assessment. It's not a tax, it's an assessment, so it's a little different. But the point is we want to have that information on a publicly available website to be able to make sure that that information is available to you. Now, I'll note this bill was vetoed by the governor, and I'll go back one on the other bill, Senate Bill 1668, related to condominiums. That was also vetoed by the governor. I'll let you know that those two bills, while they were vetoed, we're still working on those, because the governor told us that he expects to bring those back in another special session. He used that as leverage to make sure that the House and Senate could come together on a property tax bill. And so he expects to have a call later this year to bring those back up. And if we do get to a point where we have a special to deal with those bills, it should move rather quickly, since they were all passed pretty strongly in both houses. So we're expecting to get those bills later this year, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope that all works out. So just want to make sure that little detail was noted. The next one I wanted to cover is the Texas Real Estate Commission Real Estate Research Center. This bill, Senate Bill 1577 by Representative Menendez out of the San Antonio area, helped us to make sure that the Texas A&M Real Estate Research Center's funding, which is funded by all of our licenses, all of your licenses pay a fee. A part of that fee goes to the Real Estate Research Center to help maintain their funding, so that they could keep that awesome research that we all love available, from land values to development and the growth of Texas. All of these reports that Texas A&M does are just amazing reports, and they're great use. If you're not using them now as a commercial practitioner, you probably ought to go check out their website and see what they have, because it'll make you a much more informed and much smarter commercial real estate practitioner by having that information available to you. This just reasserts that their funding will continue as intended, and we're glad that we got that bill passed to make sure that that occurred. There was only a little glitch when they went from a 1-year license issuance to a 2-year license issuance that we were just trying to clean up on that. So that way we just made sure that their funding was whole. I'll move on to fending off bad bills. We probably spent half of our lobbyist legislative time focusing on bad legislation. And that usually doesn't get a whole lot of conversation where people get to hear and talk about that a lot. But I wanted to make sure you're aware of the fact that a lot of bad legislation was proposed in this session, and we had to go fend off a bunch of it. We spent a ton of time fighting stuff. I want to mention the biggest one that would be related to this community is the Senate Bill 147, which was related to a ban of foreign buyers. That would have had a traumatic impact to our ability to market properties to pretty much anybody, because we would have had to gone through some checks and balances potentially, the way that bill was originally drafted, and being kind of an arbiter of who could buy, who couldn't buy. And it would have created a huge mess in the marketplace. We worked really hard to not have that negative impact in the marketplace that we have, because we're doing great here in Texas, and we didn't want to insert some bill that was far reaching. The idea here is laudable. The intent there was for national security and to secure some of our sensitive properties around the state. Totally understand that. We were trying to work with the bill authors to kind of navigate this treacherous area of trying to adhere to some national security standards, but not alienating and discriminating against certain parties. We were okay with the concept of saying, hey, if you need to ban certain property owners, that's fine, but don't make us the gatekeepers. Make that be a state action, like the Attorney General deciding that there was a foreign buyer that was inappropriate. Let them take legal action separate from a real estate transaction. So it was really a lot of conversation we had to have about making sure that we were not the final arbiters on deciding who could and couldn't buy. Also, we didn't want to have liability related to that. And we also didn't want to discriminate. And so we worked really hard on that bill. It ended up not going anywhere because it was poorly crafted. But at the end of the day, we think if there needs to be a national security bill of some sorts, we could probably work on something like that, but not as far flung as the one that they had proposed. And so we'll keep an eye on that. So now I'm back. I'm up to the property tax bills. This is the big conversation I think many people have right now as to what happened in this session. And so I'll start with the Senate Bill 2, which is the main property tax bill for most people. And I'll hit on all the benefits for it. It's a historic tax bill. It's $18 billion of tax relief for Texans. And I'll break down all the different parts of it, as you can see here on the slide. There's the homestead exemption. So we go up from $40,000 to $100,000, which is a huge increase for homestead properties. And that was about a $5 billion of that. So it wasn't a large chunk of the $18 billion, but it was something that they wanted to make sure homesteaded property owners got some benefit as well. And so $5 billion of the 18 was applied towards the homestead exemption, which was the increase to $100,000. There was also $12 billion of the $18 billion, which went to every property parcel all across the state. So that would be your homesteaded properties, of course, your non-homesteaded properties, which would include second homes, condominiums, every commercial property. Just think of every parcel out there, land, everything would benefit from this $12 billion worth of compression. And that's a fancy term for saying that's going to buy down local school tax rates, which doesn't make a lot of sense to most people. So the way I like to say it, this is an increase in the state's funding for school finance, which means there's less property taxes needed to be raised to pay that total bill. So by effect, every property across the state of Texas is going to have a lower tax bill, which is great. And we're excited to see that happen. There's some more details I'll share down here at the lower part of the screen, but I wanted to kind of hit some of the big highlights of the bill first, and then we can kind of get into where the benefits are. But the next area of that property tax bill is what they call a circuit breaker. And basically there was a lot of conversation during the regular session and through the specials about having a cap on non-homesteaded properties, an appraisal cap. And we resist appraisal caps. We've resisted those since the dawn of the idea of appraisal caps because it distorts the marketplace. The 5% initial proposal that the House had was so low that in the area of appreciation that we've seen over the last number of years, we would have had huge distortion in the marketplace between your tax valuation and the market valuation. And anytime there's a data point out there that says this is what the property value is, it suppresses values. And that's not a good thing for property owners. A good thing ultimately is for your property to increase in value. Now, the thing that we don't like is paying more taxes. Now, those are two separate things, but the point is an increase in value is good for your balance sheet. We just don't like the tax ramifications. The idea is we want to focus on the rate setting process, the budgeting process that the cities, counties, and other taxing districts go through to make sure that they're right sizing their budgets so that things don't get out of whack and we're not paying too high of property taxes. But what this does, this circuit breaker does, it sets a 20% appraisal cap. And what that does is in these super surging valuation years, when you're seeing properties go up at a high surging rate, the idea is the circuit breaker trips and you're not going to pay double, or you're not going to see a double valuation or triple valuation or 50% valuation or even anything like that, which is what we have been seeing recently. This would at least stop it at the 20% mark so that it protects you from having those crazy valuation increase years, but it also is high enough that it doesn't distort the market, but it is low enough that it allows for some protection. So I think that was kind of where the happy place was between the legislature, the House, and the Senate, where they could find some happy place on that. And so we were supportive of kind of where that ended up as well. Another measure of the property tax bill was ARB members for your county appraisal district. There was a change there because there's been a lot of conversation about should we elect these ARB members so that they're responsible to the taxpayers instead of just to the taxing entities. And that's a little problematic for us because that tends to politicize the thing where people might run for, I'll reduce your property taxes. Well, how does the appraisal district really reduce your property taxes? It doesn't. It only does evaluation on properties. So we were a little bit concerned about having members elected, but the good thing is they're not having a majority of the members elected. They're still appointing the 5 members and only electing 3 members to a 9-member body. So they've kind of grown the body a little bit. And the assessor collector will serve as an ex officio member. What this does is, and this only occurs for counties of 75,000 or greater. So typically your larger counties. And we'll be curious to see how this works. We hope that the election of members does not get politicized. It's going to be a nonpartisan election. And so it won't be party influence, but we just hope that it remains still a neutral body focused on giving you a non-biased approach to the value of all properties in the county. So that's kind of our goal there. And we're hoping that this doesn't disrupt that. So we're looking forward to watching that. I wanted to get down to some of these other bullet points, which I thought was pretty interesting. Once you start kind of dialing in the numbers, there are 5.7 million homesteads. And all of those homesteads will see, if you had an average value of all Texas homesteaded properties, that's about $300,000 or $350,000 roughly, somewhere in that range. On average, every Texas homesteaded property would get 41.5% reduction in their school finance bill. So that's your school property tax bill. Now, if your house is worth more than that, you'll see a greater reduction. If it's worth less, you'll see a slightly less. But on average, it's about $1,300 across the state, based on that average valuation of about 300,000 to 350. So that's pretty good. That's a much bigger savings than was initially considered in the original proposals. And so we're excited to see that. And then also homesteaded properties are expected to see on average about a 23% reduction in their school property tax bill, which is pretty amazing because non-homesteaded properties usually don't get a lot of property tax relief. And so we're excited that that was a big part of this bill as well. You can see non-homesteaded properties are a much bigger population. And with $12 billion, you're getting 23% reduction in the value there. So that's a lot. The governor did just sign these bills, and so they will be affected for this year, for this 2023 tax year. So in January, when you start seeing those notices, you'll see all the benefits of these bills, assuming everything gets passed in November. And I just want to remind everybody to go vote in November, because the Senate Joint Resolution 1 is going to be on your ballots as well. And so because it's a change in your homestead exemption, that's going to require a vote in November. So you'll see that on your ballot as well. So moving on to, that was SB 2 by Betancourt and in the Senate. And SB 3 was another property tax bill that was great for businesses, because this is a franchise tax bill relief. And so usually if you're making revenues of $1 million and it's cost of living adjusted, so it's roughly today, it's about $1.2 million. If you're making revenues at or above that amount, then you have to pay a franchise tax. Everyone under that amount has to pay a no tax return. And so whether or not you're having to pay a franchise tax or not, everyone has to send in a return. And so that was the situation we were in before this bill passed. And now they increased it from $1 million cost adjusted up to $2.47 million. And in the future, it will continue to be cost adjusted. And so that's a pretty significant increase. What that did was remove an additional 67,000 businesses from the tax rolls, which is huge. And now that makes right at 1 million businesses no longer have to pay a franchise tax in Texas. And that's about 40% of all businesses in Texas, which is a wonderful proposition here. The other part of it, which I really liked, is many of us probably pay the no tax due unless we're a large brokerage. And the idea here was, if you are under the threshold, you no longer have to pay a no revenue return. That's huge because that takes time from you, like maybe a business day, to figure all that out, get the return completed and turn it in, or you have to pay a CPA or your tax advisor to do that. The good thing is now that's off the plate. You don't have to worry about it. If you don't meet that number, you don't have to file the return, which I'm excited about. And that is now in law as well. So that will take effect this year too. So those are two great tax bill conversations I wanted to make sure that I saved to the end. And I'm now at the end of my presentation. Marcus, do you have any Q&A questions that I can address?
Yes, sir. Let's see. One question is, will the slideshow be shared with attendees?
Yes, I can send that to you to make that available for you.
Okay, thank you very much. And hopefully, Lexington, that answers your question, and the same question from Bill as well. And that's the only other ones I see currently. If anybody else has a new one, we got a nice work, Trey, from Bill. So that's a win in your book, Trey. He doesn't want accolades, Bill. So we got to keep it short and sweet, okay?
No, I appreciate it. You know, we have a great team, and a lot of this stuff wouldn't have happened without our volunteer engagement, investments in the PAC, engagement at the grassroots levels, helping us come to testify. We had a lot of volunteers do that. Our leadership did a lot of that. This is a team effort, and we all made it work because we all work together, and Texas Realtors are an amazing group. And that's why we're strong as we are. We're able to make things happen in a very positive way for all the people in Texas, not just our members, but everybody. So I'm excited to be able to take on the challenge, but thank you for that.
Yeah, so also what I'll add is at the conclusion, I'll scroll down. Here's a few more that just came in. HB 5 reinstated previous economic development, and that was listed as a question from Mark Millis.
Yes. So if you recall, it may not have impacted your community at all, but 2 years ago, that expired. So the chapter 303s and all those things that the cities and school districts and counties did to attract businesses to come to their communities, those expired 2 years ago. And so at that point, Texas communities no longer had a tool in the toolbox available to compete against Georgia and other states that they were competing with for business corporate relocations or anything like that. And so we found that while it was the reason why there was a lot of disagreement a session ago about whether or not those were good, because people don't like corporate, welfare, things like that were used. Those terms were used. And so that's why the whole policy died. But the idea here was it was a delay in the tax payment for some of these corporate entities for 10 or 15 years, or depending on however the length of the term was on the agreement. And some people don't like that. But it also is a very competitive tool to bring those companies in, because they expect to get that type of treatment because everyone else is doing it. And if everyone else is doing it and Texas isn't, then we may lose out on some opportunities. And so I think that's why it came back, not in the same form. There's a lot more checks and balances, and it's a much more improved program. So I think some of the naysayers may see that if they're willing to look at it and say that it's a little bit improved program, it's not just a free-for-all. I think that that helped a lot.
Okay, thank you, Trey. And another question is from Michael Bray. With the reduction in school taxes, what keeps local entities from increasing independently?
So that was some other work we've done in previous sessions. If you recall, SB3 put a 2.5% growth on local taxing district budgets. So they cannot grow by more than 2.5%. I'm sorry, that's for school finance, 2.5%. For local taxing districts, it's 3.5%. So your county and city has a limit of 3.5% growth. So that's the limit currently. So it's basically slowing the growth, but that's it's limited to 3.5%. So they can't go make up the difference there all at once because their budget growth is limited at this point because of previous laws that we help support.
Okay, thank you. And King Bravo says, love the name. King Bravo says, do we know the language of the November ballot?
Yes, it's in that SB1. If you want to look it up, you can look up Texas Legislative online, Texas Legislature online, and just look up SB1. You'll have the entire ballot language. That's part of the bill.
Okay. And another question from Mark Millis. He asks, regarding HB 14, are the third-party reviewers pre-selected or selected by the city?
Those are selected by the individual, but the city does have an approved list. So the idea there is it's not enacted, it's not kind of in place yet, but the point is that there'll have to be like they're certified, they have to be on kind of some list of some sorts, but in general, you'll be able to pick from something like that was the intent. That was a testimony I recall.
Okay. And Mario Arriaga says, great job, Trey, and your team on these bills. And the last question I see is from Paul A. Lynn, who says, was there anything done on the power and grid?
Yes, so a number of bills related to the electric grid. Some of those were even vetoed by the governor in that there's about 76 vetoed bills. And that was his intent, to try to veto a bunch of bills to say, Senate, House, y'all figure this out. We got to get this property tax bill passed. That's more important than some of this other stuff. And I mentioned two of the bills that we were working on that got vetoed. Some power grid bills were vetoed as well, but the intent was he would bring those back at a later date. But yeah, there's been a lot of work on the power grid. I think the legislature thinks that they'd made a lot of improvements and they're seeing some benefits to it. And there were just additional tweaks done on that, but we haven't quite focused a whole lot of that on our kind of reporting back, because that is such a specialized conversation that we didn't want to bog down everything on the electric grid.
And I have a hand raised by Jesse Cantu, and I'm going to allow for his comment to talk. I'm going to unmute his mic. So Jesse, give me 1 second. And Jesse, you should be able to talk now. If you're there, Jesse, feel free to jump on in. Or maybe his question may have gotten answered, I'm not sure. But while we're waiting on Jesse, let's see if there's any other comments. Okay, so Jesse was just including the emails to use to send the slides to. So for everyone that's attended, the email address that you registered with for the webinar is what will be used to send the slides to you. If you have any questions, I'm going to drop my email address in the chat for everyone. And if you need anything or you have any additional questions that you think of afterwards that I can pass on to Trey, feel free to know, and we'll get those answered for you. And does anybody, because we definitely want to give back time if we can to you all, because I know some of you all are probably driving, and we do not want to have any distractions on Texas Realtors Watch. Okay. So if that being said, let's see. I just want to make sure I wait till the very last minute. I don't want to cut anybody off.
I think I saw,
Okay, here we go.
I think I saw a question on HB 14.
Yeah, when does it go into effect?
Most of these bills, and I'll have to double check, go into effect on September of this year or January. It just depends on the timing of when they think they can get implemented by agencies and make sure that they have the time to do something. But many of the bills are September bills. Let me see if I can do a quick little lookup for you. And I can get you that answer real quick while we're seeing if there are other answers. This one will become effective on September 1st, 2023.
Okay, thank you, Trey, for doing that.
Mhm.
And Christine says, thank you for your time and the valuable information.
Got it. Happy to be here.
Let's see. And then Jesse, I did copy your email address that was listed in the Q&A. That way I'll make sure the slides go to that correct email address. And then for everyone else, like I stated a few minutes ago, whatever email address you use to register for the webinar, excuse me, that's the one that'll be used to send you the slides when they are available to you. Okay. And okay, it's 10:47. We'll wait another 60 seconds. If there's no other comments or questions, we'll go ahead and end a little early to give you all back some of your time. And in the process, I want to thank Trey for taking the time out of his day and having a beautiful weather day always helps us here. So definitely want to appreciate everybody for taking the time out of their busy days from what they have going on to join us. And hopefully we were able to get you a great start to your day, and you can have a great midweek informative session that can carry you throughout the rest of the week and throughout the rest of the year. And we hope to see as many of you all at conference as possible in September. Let me not forget. And Antonio says, I've got to run, but thank you both. Antonio, you are most welcome. Sherry says, thank you. Great information to share with our teams and our clients so that they can make sure they register to vote. Yes, thank you, Sherry. All right. So other than that, Trey, do you have anything else you would like to add?
No, I appreciate everybody's time, and I'm glad to be here to share the information. A lot of good information that we're excited to share. And again, don't forget to vote in November, and we'll see you all soon.
All right. Have a blessed day, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks again, Trey.
All right. Bye, y'all.